He genuinely, he literally stands there, Orwellian style, saying, "I didn't say it." Like, I mean, you're literally on record saying it.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this with basically every major politician in every Western country for the past 10
He's
years.
kind
It's
of the
like
worst at
denial
it.
of the truth, isn't it? And it's kind of like, no, no, that hasn't happened. So, not happy with that. Don't think it's right. The far right comments, about the situation don't change in my mind. There is still a threat of the far right attached to this issue who've
But there's only a
utilized
threat from the
this
far right
issue.
because it was ignored for so long. Tommy Robinson was able to make hay over this. And actually, for all his other sins, he was actually one of the few people for a long time speaking up about it. He didn't expose this
But
story as many claim on his side. But he was pretty much the only person talking about this for a while.
No, not true. Not true. If you talk about something like Jess Phillips, I mean, like Jess has been doing work
She wasn't talking
continually
about grooming gangs.
on
She was
this
talking about
issue.
sexual abuse, and she did great work on that. Not so much since being in power, but she didn't talk about grooming
But
gangs.
yeah, no, but there are many, many people who've continued to do this work. I just think about the victims who've been shouting the whole time and not being listened to. People like Tommy Robinson, though, I'm sorry, we cannot give them credit. A broken clock is stop clock is right twice a day. At the
No,
same
I'm saying that
no,
the people didn't talk about it because of the threat of the far right. At that point, not talking about it, creating the threat from the far right by giving them the ammunition
that's
of them
exactly
saying, look,
that's
this is happening. You're all pretending it's not happening and you're doing it for the wrong reasons because you care more about community cohesion than you do about girls being gang raped at the age of 11. And he was right about that.
That is exactly
He was right
that kind
about.
of
He's not right about everything. I hold no candle for him and him for me. He was right about that.
That kind of summarizes the situation in the Labour Party at the moment, I think, quite well, Julia, because there is just this fear about how to tackle the far right and how to deal with that element that exists in British politics, and this complete fear that grips the Labour Party about tackling
But
it.
it's a fear about tackling the far right that is greater. The fear of being called a racist that is greater than the need, the moral urgency of saving girls from being gang raped by men old enough to be their grandfathers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the motivations for each individual are, but I can tell you across the left and across the Labour movement as a whole, it's less a fear of racism and more a fear of the far right and how it say the right thing to tackle it. And you end up saying nothing, you're paralysed by it, and then of course you give them that vacuum
But
and you
that's
allow
immoral,
them to,
isn't
as you
it?
said,
To genuinely,
take
to be
out.
more worried about the far right, to be more worried about being called a racist yourself or saying the same thing that someone you dislike says, and caring about that more than the safety of little girls. That's immoral. Has the Labour Party
I
not
don't
been
think.
immoral all this time?
No, I don't think anybody's been more concerned about that. I don't know. Like I say, I don't know the situation on the ground in these places where these things, horrendous things have happened. All I know about are the values that I want to see from a
Okay.
progressive political party, which are feminist, right? So it should be speaking up for women and young girls anyway, naturally. And then obviously being about inclusion, being about community cohesion. It's not one or the other. It shouldn't be one or
Well,
the
often
other.
it is,
As
actually.
the likes
No,
of
no,
Tommy
often it
Robinson.
is, James.
Well,
This is the bit that the Labour Party and the left struggle with, is that when those two things collide, you should choose equality and the rights of
well, I
women
have
and
no.
girls and gay people or whatever over the rights of someone whose
Yeah.
values and culture doesn't ally align with what was mainstream
No,
British
but
values.
that's the issue here, Julia, that we're going to disagree on. I'm afraid. I do not believe that somebody's culture makes them rape women. I do not believe
No,
somebody's culture makes them a danger to women. It is not
no,
culture.
okay,
It
no,
is
you're
men.
okay.
It is
Then you're
gender.
wrong. Have you travelled in the Middle East at all? Have you
I'm
travelled in the
sorry,
Middle
Julia,
East
but
at all?
I'm not
No, it's a question. Because
here.
as a woman,
I'm
I've
not
travelled in the
buying
Middle
the
East a bit. I can assure you, I am definitely less safe in certain cultures than I am in others. And I'll tell you why. It's because when women who are not
in
covered up
certain
are
countries. Yeah.
regarded as basically slags, whores, available, easy. When you have that attitude to women, and loads of cultures do, then women are are a greater risk. They are less safe, and they are treated as second-class citizens. So when you have when you have people coming to a country from this country who think that slicing off bits of women's genitalia is good for them, FGM. When they believe that girls should be basically covered up and that they should have male guardians, and that they should be married off, that they should cover up their faces even. When you have that, you must accept that when that clashes, when that comes up against, as it does, with a great big bang, Western liberal democratic values that we claim to have in this country, you got to pick a side. And I know which side I pick. Which side do you pick?
I'm sorry, I don't see the world like that, though, Julia. I mean,
Well,
you're
that's
talking about
nice for you,
countries
but the
that
world
like
is like that.
if you let me just put my
Okay.
argument across. So when you look at those countries and you talk about those issues, are you talking about Italy? Are you talking about the Vatican, where you can't, as a woman, you can't be without being covered, or without
No,
covering your hair? Are we talking
no,
about
I'm not, mate. And
Jewish
you
nations
know
like
I'm not.
Israel, where that's the case? Because we're not, are we? We're talking about countries predominantly that are Muslim.
Yes.
And we're talking about those areas where Islam, and I just think there has been such a campaign of Islamophobia over the past 10
Oh,
years,
God.
15 years in Britain, where this is played into that narrative. If you talk to people now, the word Muslim is almost interchangeable with the term foreign or the term
Well,
immigrant, as if
even
other,
I'm
as if there's
not to any of the
somebody else.
people I talk to. Um,
British
there
Muslims,
are
British Muslims that
there are
I
other
know.
countries where women also don't have equal rights. It is a particular issue in some, but not all, Muslim majority
But it's a
countries. But it's particularly
it's
an
a
issue
view that we
in the
are.
Middle East and in certain parts of Africa and elsewhere and further east. And it is a simple matter of fact. Women don't have equal rights in those countries. In many of those countries, it's not even legal to rape your wife because you're allowed to have your wife at any time. I'm sorry. I think you're living in a
The
fantasy
idea,
land.
though, that we're
It's very, very
superior.
simple. When you have two cultures coming up against each other, your view on the left is that multiculturalism is great and that all cultures and belief systems are of equal value. I consider that to be not just wrong, but to be immoral, because the reason why, women have equal rights in this country, why we've had, was it 3 prime ministers now who've been women, why women can largely walk on the streets, have equal pay and things like that, is because we view women in a certain way. An awful lot of societies, and I hate to tell you, a lot of them are Islamic based, don't view women the same way. Saudi Arabia, the women are allowed to vote in local elections, and now they've been allowed to drive, which is really nice of them. But they still can't basically leave the house without their male guardian, or travel abroad without a male guardian or without permission. So I mean,
These countries take their religion and they twist it for use of control, as has
yes,
happened in many
same with the
countries.
burqa again. But the point is, when you come up against a culture, it doesn't have to be Muslim.
Well, cultures don't
When British
necessarily
values
transfer
come up
into them.
against a culture which is opposed to those values, which side do you choose? You think you can have both? You can't
I do believe
both
you can have
cut
both. I'm
off a
sorry.
girl's clitoris and sew her vagina up, and
No, I'm
not
sorry,
cut off a
Julia.
girl's
I do
clitoris
not
and sew her
believe-
vagina up.
I
It's
do
FGM
not
or it's not
believe-
FGM, isn't it?
I do not believe that multiculturalism is the cause of the violence against women and children that we see
It's not the
perpetrated here.
cause, but it's the
simply
reason it
not.
wasn't stopped.
It simply is not the reason.
It's the
Men
reason
have
it
been
wasn't
getting away.
stopped. The concern
Men have been
about
getting
community
away with these
cohesion.
crimes. Men have been getting away with these crimes everywhere.
They
in
have.
Glasgow,
But they
40
got
miles
away with
from
it
me.
more because there was a concern that don't speak out because they're different from us and everyone will call
But
us
I'm
a racist.
sorry. To say that Tommy Robinson's done good work on this is outrageous. 40 miles from me, Julia, a gang of white men rounding up and raping women in Glasgow, right? And raping young girls in Glasgow, right? Where was he then? Where was Tommy
But the
Robinson
point
then?
is
Where
that
were the far right
the point
outside the
is that
court?
when that was found out, one assume I don't know that I read about it, but I don't have the details to hand. That I'm not saying. Good God, I'm making you really listen. If you can look at enough social media to know that Tommy Robinson and I don't see eye to eye on anything, I'm saying that you guys gave succor to people like Tommy Robinson because when he was pointing out facts about these grooming gangs, and you lot were all going, oh no, he's just horrible, racist, and far right. You gave him succor. You created him.
Firstly, it wasn't me. It had nothing to do
You,
with this.
the left.
It's nothing to me as the face of the left, who nobody knows. I mean, absolute nonsense. But then also on top of that, Julia, this is what happens. This is what happens when people use people. right? The likes of Tommy Robinson are just as culpable as those who've covered up whatever they've covered up, because they have used people for their own political ideology, and that has delayed things. Because if somebody looks at Tommy Robinson as an advocate for them, they think, well, obviously there's no
Well, if no one
credibility
else
here,
is advocating for
Why
them,
would you?
then they will turn to whoever they need to turn to. This is a fault of the left.
And that's why I don't blame the victims.
At the end of the
for
day,
that.
you're still saying, when you've got a choice between a medieval culture, in terms of some of the views, regardless of religious background, any medieval culture and their views towards women and women's safety versus British values, balance. Not the values that all rapists and paedophiles share, but nevertheless society generally shares and our law shares. You're saying I can't pick between the two of them. We'll have to combine them. That is where the British people just go, are you insane? You can't have both. Pick a side.
False dichotomy, and it just seems time and time again that people are bothered against girls. Well, not you, because I know you talk out about it, rightly so, all the time. But these people, lots of these people, only talk about assaults against women when it's committed by men with brown faces. Men are the problem. Gender is the problem.
Okay, some men, not all men, some men are the problem. The main reason people talked about it, the men, you say, your quote, men with brown faces, was because they were the men not being prosecuted when it was identified because of their ethnicity and their religious background. That was the issue. We're going to have to leave it there. Time's again. It's James Mathewson, former Labour Party spokesman. I'm going to take a breath. Claire Pearsall.